This was a humdinger, day 189 of the Trump administration, and the fighting inside this White House has blown up yet again in public, and it was the new communications director who pulled the pin. Last night, Anthony Scaramucci was angry that word of his private dinner with the president and Sean Hannity and others was leaked. He suspected Reince Priebus. He was also angry about what he thought was a leak of his financial disclosure form, which actually is meant for public disclosure. Ryan Lizza of The New Yorker got a call from Scaramucci, and Scaramucci used language so barnyard we can't repeat some of it. Here's some of what we can show you and tell you about. Scaramucci said, quote, Reince is an expletive paranoid schizophrenic, a paranoiac. Yes, that was a new one for me. He added, what I want to do is I want to expletive kill all the leakers, and I want to get the president's agenda on track so we can succeed for the American people. Then he switched to referring to himself in the third person, quote, the swamp will not defeat him. They're trying to resist me, but it's not going to work. I've done nothing wrong on my financial disclosures, so they're going to have to go expletive themselves. What we can't repeat is what he said about Steve Bannon, which is, if true, would make Bannon a gymnast. As the damage piled up, Scaramucci said this late today on Twitter, quote, I sometimes use colorful language. I will refrain in this arena, but not give up the passionate fight for Donald Trump's agenda. He later added, quote, I made a mistake in trusting in a reporter. It won't happen again. For the record, the reporter Ryan Lizza said Scaramucci placed no conditions on their conversation. The Daily Beast reported the following earlier today. The president specifically gave Scaramucci the green light to go after Reince, on air if necessary, one White House advisor told the Daily Beast, citing conversations with President Trump. Today, reporters asked White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders whether the president still had confidence in Priebus. She did not notably say yes.
Sarah, does the president have confidence in his chief of staff?
Look, I think I've addressed this question when it comes to staffing and personnel many times, that if the president doesn't, then he'll make that decision. We all serve at the pleasure of the president, and if he gets to a place where that isn't the case, he'll let you know. The president hires the very best people. They're not always going to agree. There are going to be a lot of different ideas. Unlike previous administrations, this isn't groupthink. We all come and have a chance to voice those ideas, voice those perspectives, and have a lot of healthy competition. And with that competition, you usually get the best results. The president likes that type of competition and encourages it.
Questions about what Sarah Huckabee Sanders just kindly called healthy competition inside this administration are not new. They have plagued Trump since the campaign. Here's how the president addressed them as they started to swirl in earnest less than a month into his term.
I turn on the TV, open the newspapers, and I see stories of chaos. Chaos. Yet it is the exact opposite. This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine. And the other thing, chaos. There's zero chaos. We are running. This is a fine-tuned machine.
Mr. Costa, I watched your reporting tonight, almost stream of consciousness on social media. Where do you put the after-action report right now as we speak on Scaramucci?
Scaramucci reflects the id of President Trump. He is someone who really channels President Trump. That's why there's so many people within the West Wing are reluctant to have a public war with Scaramucci in spite of his comments. You see aides being very careful in how they're treading around the president, around this new communications director.
Eli, we can't look enough at this photo from the Wall Street Journal. It's just incredible, and a lot of people on social media had a lot of fun with it, including but not limited to who will get the final rose. You indicated in your reporting today in a dual byline, I believe, that you at the Journal were in touch with Scaramucci by text today. Did you learn anything further that might indicate if Trump is okay with what he's just witnessed?
Well, Scaramucci responded to questions about whether or not he'd spoken with the president before he went out and started publicly bashing Reince Priebus. And again, this is hours before the New Yorker interview, and that transcript came out. And Scaramucci responded that indeed he had. He'd spoken to Trump twice. When I saw him earlier this week aboard Air Force One, he came back to the press cabin and made sure to tell all the reporters there that the president had sent him back to do so. And so what Bob just said is right. People inside that West Wing understand that right now, this is a man who has the president's blessing and his ear and is very close to him. There may be no one closer to the president right now than Scaramucci. And so in spite of what you're seeing outwardly, the chaos, everything that is sort of devolving publicly, inside, people are trying to figure out how to cozy up to Scaramucci, a guy who seems intent on cleaning house, because a lot of these people do want to stay there.
Stephanie Ruhle, you bring perhaps the most gripping piece of reporting to the table tonight, and I hope people pay attention to your words, because as you lay it out, Scaramucci has a motive behind his behavior and his words.
Without a doubt. Anthony Scaramucci is there for one reason. He is trying to sell his company, Skybridge Capital, a fund of funds, to one buyer. There's no backup buyer, so it's make it or break it. And that is HNA, a Chinese conglomerate, which may have direct ties or at least needs to be reviewed to have ties to the Chinese government. HNA spent $20 billion making acquisitions last year. Already this year, almost $6 billion. Those acquisitions need to get approved by the U.S. government. We know from Anthony's financial disclosure form last night, he wants to sell his stake in Skybridge for $180 million. That means he would pocket $90 million for himself. What is standing between $90 million and Anthony Scaramucci is regulatory approval. The regulatory body is run by the Treasury Department. The President of the United States could rubber stamp this and get it through. So Anthony Scaramucci is there to please the president, get his deal done, possibly work in the White House, and won't that be a win? And the president loves what he sees. People inside the White House and White House lawyers are saying, hold the phone. A week ago, he was on the podium and he said, you won't see me start for a few weeks. I don't want to have any conflicts. I can't start yet. And he has been off to the races. So he is stuck in and potentially thinking, well, clearly the White House is going to make this happen for me. They're not going to kick me out now. Or will they? The president loves to watch this, but I spoke to someone in the White House who said, the president's not bound to keep him. The president owes no one nothing. These people are pawns to President Trump. And right now, Scaramucci is doing exactly what the president wants.
Forgive me, but a casual viewer would come away from your remarks and think that the public service aspect of what Mr. Scaramucci has signed on to do is somehow secondary to personal wealth.
They may be tied together. I mean, is it he only wants to make money off of this? Unclear. But in terms of following the money, what would motivate someone so much? Why is he there to so dramatically please the president? Well, it's not just about public service. That's a whole lot of money at stake. And if there's only one buyer, which HNA is, and there isn't a buyer beneath it, that's a lot.
Mr. Scaramucci, we should add, has been on this broadcast. He's been in this very studio where we invite him back day, time, night of his choosing. He was straight up with us on his last visit here. Mr. Stengel, you are offering, as I understand it, a way to save us from ourselves by injecting sports, and not just sports, the 1962 Mets. How is that?
Well, Brian, you got a hint. So my namesake, Casey Stengel, once said, can't anybody here play this game? And that's sort of how I'm looking at the White House. I mean, it's funny that Scaramucci chose the job of communications advisor. He said today, I made the mistake of trusting a reporter. And you're the communications advisor. So he made the most rookie mistake, which is to not say that it's off the record. And by the way, had he said it was off the record, he would have been the primary leaker of all of that information that Ryan Lizza would have published. So he would err on both sides. He really, to use another sports metaphor, it's like welcome to the NFL, Anthony. He can't really play this game, and he's got to learn how to do it. And I think he's self-immolating while he's trying to learn.
Robert Costa, I sat this afternoon and watched the entire White House ceremony, giving the Medal of Valor to all the first responders in Alexandria, Virginia, including the 2 U.S. Capitol Police officers. There you see them right there behind the president, who were wounded and so bravely moved into the breach to put down the gunman. I had tears in my eyes. I imagine everybody watching did. Sadly, again, our news agenda has been swiped away from something like that, a truly presidential event in the White House. So having said that, is this the worst stretch they've had?
Well, it's certainly been an intriguing turn of events, and this is a White House that continues to have disruption inside, infighting. I think whether it's the worst turn or not, it's not for me to say. I will say that President Trump, based on all of my reporting, is really finding himself relying on loyalists more than ever, not on the Republican Party, not on establishment figures. He's turning to people who echo him, who channel him. He feels he has to be defiant because everyone has incoming when it comes to the Russia probe, when it comes to a stalled congressional agenda, and so much else.
What about the agenda that a lot of it we're waiting to hear?
In particular on health care, the Republican Party is right now behind me on Capitol Hill trying to check the box, fulfill the pledge they made years ago to their base voters that they would repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. But now the law has settled into these states. Many governors want the Medicaid expansion, and what they're looking at is this so-called skinny repeal, which would be a watered-down version of wholesale repeal. And even that skinny version, it's causing a lot of debate and consternation among Republicans.
Except, Brian, here's one thing. The one cabinet member who's truly carrying out the most Trumpist agenda is Jeff Sessions.
Yeah.
You've got Jeff Sessions, who actually is doing what they said they do on the campaign trail, and that's public enemy number one. It was Steve Bannon who said to Anthony Scaramucci last Friday morning, "You will get this job over my dead body." Well,
but
it sure
but
sounds...
it's obvious that Trump doesn't care about the agenda. He looks at Sessions only through the scrim of the Russia investigation. Not a single thing that he's doing about executing policy. He's only looking at it through his relationship to Mueller and the investigation.
Eli, here's a big question. I'm going to put up the comments of two friends of ours on social media to help make the point. First, there was Glenn Thrush this afternoon from the New York Times. More and more people I talk to, especially Republicans, are asking, what the hell is going to happen when these guys get hit by a real crisis? Then our own Richard Engel. U.S. intelligence officials tell me they're worried the chaos at the White House leaves the U.S. in a weak position to deal with any potential major international crisis. Eli, as a citizen, as someone who cares deeply about our country and its people, that is blood-chilling.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, this is the problem with all of this. There is this, the president views this whole thing kind of as a show. I think if he didn't, I don't know that Anthony Scaramucci gets hired to be the White House communications director and licensed to act the way he's been acting over the last 7 days. But he's been brought in because the president loves the drama. And as much as the drama may obscure a moment today that actually was presidential at the White House, like you pointed out, it's also obscuring a number of rebukes that came showering down on this White House just today. From 3 senators, you had Grassley, you had Ben Sass, you have Lindsey Graham talking about if he goes, you know, and tries to fire Mueller, that could be the beginning of the end of his presidency. You have the president of the Boy Scouts issuing a rebuke, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I mean, all these things that are people that are trying to draw a line in the sand, and that is getting drowned out of the news cycle because nobody can turn away from this reality TV-style train wreck at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And that is a thing that has always sort of worked to the president or to Donald Trump's advantage in business. But I think, you know, we have a country that thankfully hasn't had to endure a national security crisis in the first 6 months of this presidency. But there are concerns about some sort of constitutional crisis that we could face should the president do the sort of unthinkable relating to the Russia situation. And we have yet to see the president himself and the people around him really begin to behave in a way that reflects that they take these things as seriously as do the national security team at the White House and as a lot of people who have served this country for years and years in Congress.
Stephanie, last word.
Robert Mueller was at work today. So while this was a massive distraction and we're all talking about the Mooch show and Reince versus Mooch, the beat goes on and Robert Mueller continues that investigation, and that is the thorn in President Trump's side, to your point earlier, that is sticking him every single moment and distracting him, and that's not changing.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.